The applause died in a single breath. Emily Carter stood frozen under the gymnasium lights, the gold medal still warm at her collarbone. The principal crossed the stage in 3 long strides, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a microphone raised. "There's been a violation," he said. The ribbon was unclipped before 700 witnesses. Her name was scratched off the board. The medal traveled across the stage to Chloe Bennett, daughter of the district's largest donor, while Emily's lips trembled and the auditorium held its breath. In the back row, a man in a plain gray jacket did not stand. Daniel Carter, single father. Quiet eyes, folded hands, spoke only once, low enough that the people beside him leaned in. "I hope you've prepared yourselves for tomorrow." No one in that room understood yet what those words would cost them. Long before the auditorium fell silent, before the medal changed hands, and the principal's smile turned cold. There was only a porch in a small town outside Austin, a wooden chair painted blue too many times, and a man who had learned to live with too much quiet. Daniel Carter had buried his wife, Sarah, 8 years earlier. She had gone in March, slipped under a fever no one expected to lose her to, and in the months after the funeral, he had taught himself how to braid a 6-year-old's hair, how to read a permission slip without crying, how to hold a small hand at a school gate without flinching at the empty space where another hand used to be. By the time their daughter turned 14, the rhythm of the Carter household had become its own kind of language. Oatmeal at 6. Uniform pressed by 1/4 past. The porch light burning every night until the screen door slapped shut and Emily was home. Daniel rarely spoke about his work. To the neighbors, he was simply a man in a plain gray jacket who left before sunrise and came home after dinner, who kept his lawn cut and his name out of the parent-teacher chatter. He worked. He had once told Emily on the administrative side of the state's education system paperwork, oversight, the kind of job that did not photograph well. He left it at that. Even Emily, who was old enough now to wonder why her father took late phone calls in his study and why men in suits sometimes dropped envelopes at the door, had stopped asking. She knew her father sat on some kind of board. She did not know what the board did, and her father had never pressed the matter. What Emily did instead was run. She ran the way some children pray early and alone before the sun had finished climbing over the practice field. By 13, she was beating the seniors. By 15, her coach had stopped timing her with a stopwatch and started timing her against a sheet of school records. Daniel watched from the bleachers some mornings, a thermos of black coffee cooling in his hand, and saw the same long stride Sarah used to have when she walked across a kitchen. He never told Emily that. Some inheritances belonged only to the person carrying them. The school itself, Westbrook Preparatory, sat behind a wrought iron gate on the wealthier side of the district. It was the kind of place where the parking lot held more sports cars than the faculty lot held sedans, and where the donor wall in the lobby had grown 3 plaques longer in just 2 years. Emily had been admitted on academic merit and a partial athletic scholarship, a fact half her classmates seemed to find amusing and the other half found unforgivable. Chief among the second half was Chloe Bennett. Chloe ran the 400-meter like a girl who had been told her whole life that she was already winning. Her father, Richard Bennett, owned 6 construction firms across Central Texas and had personally financed the new track surface Emily was now training on. The plaque at the starting line bore his name in raised brass letters. Chloe ran over those letters every afternoon. Emily did too, only she always slowed down at that spot, as if out of some private respect for a thing she could never have bought herself. The two of them were rivals, the way 2 reeds in the same wind are rivals pressed together, bending in different directions. Chloe had the smile, the sponsors, the team captaincy. Emily had the times. The state qualifying meet would be the place those 2 truths finally met. The morning of the meet, Daniel knelt in the front hallway and tied Emily's left shoelace himself. He had not done that since she was 9. She let him. Her hands were trembling too much to do it well. "You don't have to win today," he said. "I know. You only have to run the way you ran on Tuesday." Emily looked up at him then, and something in her face was so close to Sarah's that he had to glance at the porch light to steady himself. "What if they don't let me win, Dad?" It was a strange question. He didn't ask her what she meant. He just kissed the top of her head the way fathers kiss daughters, whose mothers they have buried, and said, "Then we'll find out who they are." She didn't lose that afternoon. She didn't even come close to losing. Emily ran the 400-meter final at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in 56.2 seconds, a school record, a district record, a time fast enough that 2 college recruiters in the stands stopped writing on their clipboards and started watching her the way one might watch a comet. The crowd rose. Even some of the parents who had been quietly rooting against her clapped the way people sometimes clap for inevitabilities they hadn't seen coming. At the finish line, Chloe Bennett, who had come in second by nearly a full second, wiped her face with a towel and would not look up. In the front row, Richard Bennett was already on his phone. The medal ceremony, by the schedule printed in every program, was set for 6 o'clock that evening in the gymnasium. Principal Howard Whitaker hung the gold medal around Emily's neck himself when the moment came. He smiled for the cameras. Richard Bennett, seated dead center in the third row, did not. The applause was still going when Whitaker walked back onto the stage with a manila folder in his hand and a different smile altogether. The cameras kept rolling. The crowd, slow to understand, kept clapping a moment too long. Then the principal raised his microphone and the room turned into the room the hook had already preserved. The footsteps, the folder, the unclipping. The medal traveling slow as a funeral across the stage to Chloe Bennett. The grounds Whitaker cited had been worded carefully. Emily's racing shoes, he announced, had a sole thickness exceeding the new league regulation introduced earlier today. A regulation no parent in the audience had heard of, and no athlete had been informed of in writing. Emily's coach, a woman named Patricia Lawson, half rose from her seat with her mouth already open, then sat back down because someone in the back of the room had caught her eye and shaken his head. No one would later be able to say who that man had been. Emily did not cry on the stage. She did the harder thing. She stood very still and let the medal be lifted from her neck. She let Chloe receive it. She let the photographer take the picture. Then she walked off the stage with her chin raised and her hands clenched at her sides, and only when she reached her father in the back row, only when his arm came around her shoulders, did her face finally break. Daniel Carter did not stand. He did not shout. He folded his hands, and he said low enough that only the people in his row could hear, though several would later swear they had heard it from clear across the room. "I hope you've prepared yourselves for tomorrow." The drive home was 41 minutes long. Emily did not speak for 38 of them. When she finally did, her voice was so small, it sounded as if it had come from somewhere underneath her ribs. "Maybe they were right, Dad. About the shoes. About me." Her gaze stayed fixed on the dark Texas highway sliding past her window. "Maybe I don't belong there. Maybe I never did. Everyone in that gymnasium, they're all somebody's something. Their dads build buildings, run hospitals, donate wings to the library. We have a porch and a lawnmower." Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "You think a porch and a lawnmower aren't worth anything," he said. "You know what I mean." "I do." His hands shifted on the wheel once, then settled. "But I want you to listen to me very carefully, Emily. What happened tonight wasn't about your shoes. It wasn't about you. Somebody in that gymnasium made a decision before you ever crossed the finish line. Somebody decided what the result was going to be. And I want you to understand that there is a difference, a real knife blade difference between losing and being robbed." She didn't answer him. "You weren't beaten today," he said. "You were taken from." The headlights swept a long curve in the road, and the Carter farmhouse came into view at the end of the drive porch, light burning just as it always had been. Emily spoke once more very quietly. "Just let it go, Dad. Please. I don't want any more trouble. I just want to be done." Daniel parked the truck. He turned off the engine. He looked at her across the dim cab in the way Sarah used to look at him across their kitchen table. the look that said, "I'm choosing my next words on your behalf, and I want you to remember that." "I can't promise you that," he said. Emily went inside without answering. That night, after she had cried herself to sleep with her bedroom door half open the way she still liked it, Daniel Carter walked into his study and did not turn on the lights. He sat for a long time at his desk, with his hands resting flat on the wood. On the wall above the desk hung 2 framed photographs, one of Sarah laughing at a county fair, one of Emily, age 7, crossing a finish line drawn in sidewalk chalk. He did not look at the photographs. He looked at the phone. Then he picked it up. The first number he dialed reached a man named Frank Holloway, who answered on the second ring, despite it being 11 minutes past midnight. The second number reached a woman in Austin, who handled, as Daniel sometimes put it, the parts of the job that did not appear on letterhead. The third reached a small accounting office that kept records of donations to private schools across 3 counties. Daniel did not raise his voice on any of those calls. He asked in each, for the same thing, every document, every email, every wire transfer, every signed waiver tied to Westbrook Preparatory in the last 24 months. By 2 in the morning, 3 boxes of paperwork had been quietly pulled from cold storage and were already moving toward a courier service. Daniel switched off the desk lamp and walked back through the dark hallway. He stopped at Emily's bedroom door. She was asleep with the metal-shaped patch of paler skin still visible at her collarbone, where the ribbon had pressed only hours before. Daniel watched her chest rise and fall. He had told her once when she was very young and afraid of a thunderstorm that the world was full of louder things than thunder, and that the trick was learning to stand quiet enough to hear them coming. Tomorrow, he thought the louder things would begin. He closed her door and went to bed. The first phone call came before sunrise. Daniel was already at the kitchen table when it rang the boxes of paperwork stacked in his study, still untouched, a cup of black coffee cooling beside his hand. The caller was Patricia Lawson, Emily's coach. Her voice was tight and unfamiliar, the voice of someone who had not slept. "Mr. Carter, I shouldn't be doing this," she said. "I have a son in college and a mortgage, but you need to hear it from me before you hear it from them. Whitaker called me at 5 this morning. He told me that if anyone asks me about that race, I'm to say the shoe regulation was reviewed during the previous board cycle. That's what I'm to say. He used those words." "Was it?" Daniel said. "It was not. There was no review. There was no notice. The rule was emailed to me at 4:41 yesterday afternoon, after the final, before the medal ceremony." Coach Lawson's breath caught. "I have the email, but I don't know if I can give it to you." "I'm not going to ask you to give me anything you can't live with, Coach." "Then don't ask," she said, and hung up. By 8:30, Daniel was in the marble lobby of Westbrook Preparatory, asking in the quiet, courteous voice he used when he intended to be remembered for a copy of the meet's official minutes and the board's regulation changes for the academic year. The receptionist sent him to Vice Principal Marcia Doyle, who sent him to the athletic director, who sent him back to Vice Principal Doyle. By 10 o'clock, he had been politely told that the records were under review, that the proper procedure was a written request submitted through the Parents' Liaison Office, and that the Parents' Liaison Office responded to inquiries within 10 to 14 business days. He filed the written request anyway. He noted the time on his copy. He smiled at the receptionist and asked her for her name, which she gave him before she realized she had given it. By 11, he was in his truck again, watching 3 young women in Westbrook uniforms cross the parking lot toward the cafeteria, and one of them, a tall girl with a long blonde ponytail, was Chloe Bennett, walking very fast and not looking at anyone. The gold medal was not around her neck. He filed that observation too. The trouble for Emily, meanwhile, had already begun. She walked into her first class to find her usual desk taken. The girl who had taken it did not look up. By second period, a folded paper square had appeared in Emily's locker. She opened it in the bathroom and threw it away without finishing it. By lunchtime, 3 of the girls she had eaten with for 2 years had moved to a different table without explanation. The hallway whispers had a shape to them, not loud, not direct, but constant, the way a faucet drips behind a wall. Cheat. Bitter. Her dad's making a scene. She heard a senior boy say it as she passed the lockers, making a scene, as though her father had walked up onto the stage shouting, as though the metal had walked itself off her neck on its own. The school counselor pulled her into an office at 1:15. The counselor was a kind woman named Linda Pierce, who had taught Emily's freshman seminar and had liked her, and who now sat across the desk with a folder she would not quite open. "Emily, I need you to understand the position the school is in," she spoke softly. "There are families involved here who care very much about how this is handled. I'd hate to see you put in a position where your enrollment is reviewed. Sometimes, the kindest thing a student can do for everyone is let the dust settle." "I didn't do anything wrong," Emily said. "I know." "Then why does the dust need to settle?" Counselor Pierce closed the folder. She did not have an answer. What she said instead, after a long moment of looking at her hands, was, "Your father knows the world is not always fair. Trust him to know that. But ask him whether what's coming is going to fall on him or on you." Emily walked home that afternoon with that sentence sitting inside her like a small, cold stone. While she walked 3 counties to the south, Daniel Carter was opening the first of the boxes. He worked through them at his kitchen table, not his study, because the kitchen had a clearer light, and because Sarah had always done their household paperwork at that table, and the room remembered how to hold quiet, methodical work. He read the minutes of every Westbrook board meeting going back 2 years. He read the donor reports. He read the contracts between the school and its biggest patrons, including the one that bore Richard Bennett's signature, and the one beneath that, and the one beneath that, until a shape began to emerge. Not the shape of a single cheated race, but a longer, lower pattern repeated quietly across seasons. There had been another girl 2 years before Emily, a swimmer named Hannah Wexler. She had been disqualified at districts on a technicality involving a starting block, and the medal had gone to the daughter of a board member. Hannah had transferred out the following semester. There had been a debate champion the year before that, displaced under a rule, clarified the morning of the final round. There had been a chemistry award, reassigned by faculty vote 3 faculty members, all of whom had been hired the same week. The pattern was not loud. It would not have been visible to anyone reading any single year's records in isolation. But across 3 years, it sat in the data, the way a hand sits inside a glove. Then he found the email. It was buried in an attachment chain, a chain of forwards, a chain of FYI notes, the kind of internal sloppiness that came from people who had never expected anyone outside their building to ever read what they wrote. The message was from Principal Whitaker to Vice Principal Doyle, time-stamped 4/18 on the afternoon of Emily's race, and it consisted of 2 sentences. "R. Bennett is not going to accept this result. We need a defensible reason by 6. Anything will do." Daniel read it 3 times. The second time, his hand was steady. The third, it was not. "Anything will do." He printed it. He printed it 3 more times. He put 1 copy in the lockbox in his study, 1 copy in the glove compartment of his truck, 1 copy in a manila envelope addressed to his attorney, and 1 copy he left face up on the kitchen table for himself, because some sentences a man needed to keep looking at until he had decided what kind of person they were going to make him. That night, Emily found him sitting at the table with it. "Dad." "Yes, sweetheart." She did not ask him what he was reading. She sat down across from him with her hands wrapped around her elbows, the way she used to as a younger child when she was cold. "There were people at school today saying things about you." "I imagine there were. They said you were threatening the school, that you were using your job to scare people." Her chin lifted a fraction. "I don't even understand what your job really does, Dad. You sit on some kind of board, you've told me that. But I don't know what that means. They're saying you're the bad one." Daniel folded the email and slid it under his coffee cup. "What do you think?" he said. "I think you tied my shoe yesterday morning." Her voice cracked, but only slightly. And I think the dad who tied my shoe is not the one they're talking about. Okay then. But Dad, she drew a long, unsteady breath. If you keep going, they're going to come for you. Counselor Pierce as much as told me. And I can't be the reason that happens to you. I'm not worth it. I'm not. He reached across the table and took both her hands in one of his. Emily, look at me. She looked at him. There is no version of my life, he said, in which you are not worth it. There has never been a version of my life in which you are not worth it. Anyone who asks you that question is asking the wrong question, and the right answer to the wrong question is silence. Do you understand me? She nodded, but her eyes were wet, and she pulled her hands back into her lap, and she did not stay at the table much longer. He thought that night that he had her with him. He was wrong about that, but only by a few days. The counterattack came in the form of a story. It appeared first in the local paper, a polite, careful 5-paragraph piece about a Westbrook parent reportedly leveraging professional connections to dispute an athletic disqualification. Daniel was not named. He did not need to be. The piece quoted school sources, describing an atmosphere of intimidation. It quoted concerned families, worried about the precedent of personal grievances disrupting school operations. By the following morning, the same story had been picked up, in slightly sharper form, by a regional blog that covered private school athletics, and by the afternoon, it had drifted into the Facebook groups where the Westbrook parents lived. The shape of the story was clean and old, a difficult man, a sore loser, a daughter being used as a pretext, a school doing its quiet best under pressure. Nowhere in any of it was the word email. Nowhere in any of it was the timestamp 418. Nowhere in any of it was Hannah Wexler's name, or the swimmer's medal, or the debate champion, or the chemistry award. Daniel watched the story land, and did nothing for 2 days. He had been in his work long enough to know that the first instinct to publish, to push back, to flood the same channels with his own version, was the wrong one. Public arguments rewarded whoever was loudest, not whoever was right. He kept his head down and kept reading boxes. But Emily could not keep her head down. Emily had to go to school. On the 3rd day, she came home and did not come out of her room. On the 4th day, the college recruiter who had been at the meet, a woman from a small but respected program in Oregon, called the house. She was polite. She was sorry. She said her department had decided, given the cloud over the situation, to pause their consideration of Emily's application for the current cycle. They wished her well. They hoped that next year, after things had quieted down, she might apply again. Daniel heard Emily take the call from the kitchen. He heard her say, "Thank you," in the small, bright voice she used when she did not want anyone to know she was about to cry. He heard her hang up. He heard her bedroom door close, not slam close, and that was somehow worse. Coach Lawson called him that night. "They got to me, Mr. Carter." "What happened?" "They didn't fire me. They didn't have to. The athletic director sat in my office for 40 minutes today and explained to me how grateful he was for my years of service, and how much my son was enjoying his scholarship at Texas State, and how he would hate to see anything become complicated for either of us." Her voice was flat now, scraped clean. "I can't be a witness for you. I'm sorry. I have to feed my family." "I understand. I have the email. The 441 email. I'm sending it to my own personal account tonight. I'm not going to send it to you. But I'm not going to delete it either. That's all I can give you. Do what you want with that." She hung up before he could thank her. He stood at the window of his study for a long time, after that looking out at the porch light he had left on for Emily, even though Emily was in her bed. The porch light had been on every night since Sarah had died. There were nights in the beginning when he had told himself that he kept it burning for Emily, so she wouldn't be afraid of the dark. But the truth was, he had kept it burning for himself, because some nights it was the only thing in his life he could keep from going out. 3 days later, the Westbrook board released its statement. It came in a single page, signed by Howard Whitaker as principal, and by the board chair, a man named Greg Tillman, whose family owned a chain of orthodontic clinics across the hill country. The statement said that the matter of the recent track and field disqualification had been reviewed thoroughly by the appropriate parties, that the integrity of the school's procedures had been confirmed, that the school regretted any distress caused to families involved, and that the matter was now considered closed. The statement did not name Emily. It did not need to. Daniel read it twice and set it on the kitchen table next to the printed email. Anything will do. The matter was now considered closed. The phone rang an hour later. It was a man Daniel had worked with for 9 years, a man whose voice he had not heard sound this way before. The man spoke for less than 2 minutes. He said that there had been inquiries. That was the word he used, inquiries into Daniel's ongoing personal involvement in a matter touching on board-supervised institutions. He said that the inquiries had reached high enough that he was being asked as a friend to advise Daniel to step back. He said that he did not need to explain what stepping back meant. He said he hoped Daniel understood. He said he was sorry. Then he hung up too. Daniel sat with the receiver in his hand for a long minute before he set it down. Emily found him there. She was in her pajamas. Her hair was undone. Her eyes were red but dry. They'd been dry for some hours now, in the way a creek bed is dry with all the water already gone somewhere else. It's on the news now, Dad. I know. They're saying you're being investigated. They're saying your job is in trouble. Her voice did not rise. They're saying it's because of me. It is not because of you. It is because of me. Whether you say it or not, it is. She stepped into the kitchen. The light from the hall fell across half her face and left the other half in shadow, and for a moment she looked older than 15, older than Sarah had ever gotten to look. Dad, I want you to stop. Emily, I want you to stop. I don't want the medal. I don't want the scholarship. I don't want any of it. I want my father. I want you in your job and in this house and on the porch in the evening, and I don't care about any race I'm ever going to run again as long as I live. Do you hear me? I hear you. Stop. Please. He looked at her for a long time. He looked at the email under his coffee cup. He looked at the porch light through the kitchen window. He looked at the empty chair across the table where Sarah had used to sit on nights like this one, and he tried very honestly to imagine what Sarah would have told him to do. Sarah, he thought, would have killed him if he stopped, but Sarah was not the one standing in his kitchen. Okay, sweetheart, he said. Emily blinked. Okay, okay. I hear you. I'll stop. She did not believe him at first. He could see her not believing him, but he kept his face very still, and after a long moment she nodded, and her shoulders came down half an inch, and she went to him and put her arms around his neck the way she had not done since she was 12. He held her there for as long as she let him. When she went back to bed, he sat alone at the table with the email and the press release and the cooling coffee, and he understood that he had just told his daughter the first real lie he had ever told her. He understood that he was going to have to live with that. And he understood that there was now only one move left. He picked up the phone again, but this time he did not call Frank Holloway, and he did not call the woman in Austin, and he did not call the attorney. He called a number he had not called in 4 years. The number rang twice. A woman answered who had once on another night very much like this one told Daniel Carter to stop being a man who watched things and start being a man who walked into rooms. It's me, he said. I need you to put me on the agenda. She did not ask which agenda. She did not need to. When? She said. The next session. The full state board. Public record. Cameras on. The line was quiet for a beat. You're sure? She said. I'm sure. All right, Daniel. I'll put you on. He hung up the phone. He turned off the porch light for the first time in 8 years. Then he sat at the kitchen table in the dark and waited for morning. Morning came without ceremony. Daniel made breakfast the way he always made breakfast: oatmeal at 6, 2 bowls brown sugar, in Emily's, none in his own. He did not tell her where he was going. He kissed the top of her head at the front door, the way fathers kiss daughters, who do not yet know what their fathers are about to do for them. And he told her he loved her, and he drove south toward Austin, with a single accordion folder on the passenger seat, and the porch light dark behind him for the first time in 8 years. The State Education Board met in a chamber on the 3rd floor of a limestone building 4 blocks from the Capitol. The room had the kind of ceiling that swallowed sound, the kind of long, curving bench that suggested the people behind it answered to something larger than themselves. There were 9 seats at that bench. Daniel had sat in the 3rd one from the left for the better part of 6 years, though he had never asked anyone at Westbrook to look up his name, and no one ever had. He did not sit there today. Today he sat at the witness table with the folder in front of him, and his hands resting flat on the wood, the way they had rested on his desk the night he made the first call. The chamber was fuller than usual. Word travels in certain rooms, even when no one has been told what is coming. 2 reporters were in the press gallery. A camera operator from the Public Records Channel adjusted his tripod, and a second camera, the chamber's own ceiling. Mounted security recorder blinked its small red light from above the dais. In the 3rd row behind the school, administrators called to attend. Howard Whitaker sat very still in a pressed gray suit, his binder unopened on his lap. 3 seats over and 1 row back sat Richard Bennett, who was looking at his phone the way men look at their phones when they are trying very hard to seem unbothered. The chair of the board, a tall, white-haired woman named Eleanor Hayes, opened the session. She read the items on the agenda in the dry, careful voice of someone who had been reading items on agendas for 30 years. When she came to the 4th one, she said only, "We will hear from board member Daniel Carter on a matter of institutional conduct," and she nodded down the bench at him. Whitaker's binder slid from his lap. The sound of it hitting the carpet was the loudest thing in the room. Daniel rose. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. "Madam Chair, members of the board, what I'm bringing to this chamber today is not a complaint about a race. It is not a complaint about a medal. I want that on the record before I begin." He opened the accordion folder. "What I'm bringing today is a pattern." He walked them through it the way a man walks another man through a deed of sale, slowly, page by page, with no decoration. The swimmer 2 years earlier. The debate champion the year before that. The chemistry award reassigned by 3 faculty members hired in the same week. He named names. He cited dates. He read the language of the rule changes, allowed the regulations introduced in every case, in the hours between an event and a ceremony. He laid the relevant board minutes on the desk in front of him one by one, until there were 11 of them fanned out like cards in a hand he had been holding for a long time. Then he reached for the last sheet of paper in the folder. On the afternoon of the most recent meet, he said, "At 4:18 in the afternoon, approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes after my daughter crossed the finish line, and approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes before the medal ceremony, Principal Howard Whitaker sent the following email to Vice Principal Marcia Doyle." He read it. "Our Bennett is not going to accept this result. We need a defensible reason by 6. Anything will do." The chamber went still in a way that no chamber goes still by accident. Eleanor Hayes set down her pen. One of the reporters in the press gallery turned in his seat to look at Howard Whitaker. Whitaker did not look back. He was looking at the floor. "I'd like to enter this email into the record," Daniel said. Along with the second, one time-stamped 4:41 the same afternoon, in which a new shoe regulation was emailed to the head track coach 23 minutes after the email I just read, and approximately 79 minutes before that regulation was used to remove a gold medal from a 15-year-old girl on a stage in front of 700 witnesses. He set the second email beside the first. "The head coach in question is not present today, and I want to be clear with this board about why. She was approached by a member of the school administration and informed in language I will spare this chamber that her son's college scholarship would benefit from her silence. She kept the email anyway. She forwarded it to her personal account. She is willing to confirm its authenticity in a sworn statement should this board request one. Her name is Patricia Lawson, and I would ask this board to protect her. He set a third document beside the first two, a single printed still frame from the gymnasium's own ceremony, recording time-stamped 6:04 p.m., showing the medal being unclipped from Emily's neck. This image, he said, is from the school's own ceremony archive. The school maintains those recordings on a 30-day retention cycle. I would respectfully suggest that this board send someone to obtain the original footage before the retention window closes. A murmur went across the press gallery. Eleanor Hayes raised one finger, and the murmur went out like a candle. Daniel did not turn to look at Whitaker. He had not looked at Whitaker once during his entire address. He turned instead toward Richard Bennett in the third row. "There is one more thing I want to put on the record," he said, "before I sit down. The young woman who received the medal that afternoon is 15 years old. She did not write that email. She did not change those rules. She ran a race, and she came in second, and someone who loved her could not live with that. I don't have any quarrel with Chloe Bennett. I want the record to show that. My quarrel is with the adults in this room who taught her that the rules of a race could be edited by a phone call. The damage that has been done in this matter has not been done only to my daughter. It has been done to every student at that school who is now learning what their classmates' last names are worth." He closed the folder. "That's all I have, Madam Chair." He sat down. The chamber held its breath for perhaps 4 full seconds. Then Eleanor Hayes did something she rarely did, which was lean forward over her microphone before any other board member had spoken. "Mr. Whitaker," she said. "Stand, please." Whitaker stood. His face was the color of paper. "You will remain available to this board through the close of business today. You will not return to your campus until we have spoken with you in private session. The athletic director at Westbrook Preparatory will be contacted by this office within the hour. The vice principal will be contacted by the end of the day. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Sit down." He sat. He did not sit so much as he fell. The session went on for another 40 minutes after that, but Daniel did not hear most of it. He had said what he had come to say. He had laid the thing down on the table the way he had been raised by a father. He barely remembered to lay things down flat in daylight, where everyone could see them. He gathered his folder and his coat. He shook Eleanor Hayes' hand on his way out of the chamber. In the corridor outside, one of the reporters tried to ask him a question, and he answered, very politely, "Please ask my daughter's coach. She's the one who took the risk." He drove home in the long afternoon light, and the radio was on, but he did not remember afterward what had been playing. By the end of that week, Howard Whitaker was no longer the principal of Westbrook Preparatory. The athletic director had resigned. Marcia Doyle had been placed on administrative leave, pending a separate review. The board chair, Greg Tillman, had stepped down to spend more time with his family, which was the language men of his sort used when they had been advised very gently to stop being a public problem. 3 other staff members lost their positions before the next school board meeting. The story made the regional papers, then the state ones. The phrase "anything will do" appeared in a headline. After that, it appeared in 3 more. Hannah Wexler called the house one evening from a community college up in Oklahoma. She and Daniel talked for 40 minutes. Emily heard her father laugh at one point during the call. A real laugh, the kind he had not laughed in some time. The debate champion's mother wrote a letter. So did the parents of the chemistry student. None of those families had ever met one another, and now they had a thing in common, and that thing had been given a name. 2 weeks after the state board hearing, Westbrook Preparatory held a small ceremony in the same gymnasium where the medal had been taken. It was not a televised event. There were no donors in the 3rd row. The interim principal, a soft-spoken woman named Margaret Ellsworth, brought in from outside the district, read a short statement, acknowledging that an injustice had been done, that the school accepted responsibility for it, and that the official record of the meet was being amended. Then she called Emily Carter to the stage. Emily walked up the steps in her own running shoes, the same ones she had worn that afternoon, the ones whose soles had once been declared, by a man, no longer employed, to be a fraction of an inch too thick. She did not look at the audience. She looked at her father, who was standing at the back of the gymnasium in the same plain gray jacket, with his hands resting easy at his sides. Margaret Ellsworth hung the gold medal around Emily's neck. The ribbon settled against her collarbone, and Emily closed her eyes for a moment, and Daniel saw it from the back of the room, the small exact way her shoulders came down, half an inch, the same half inch they had come down when she had asked him to stop, and he had said okay and meant the opposite. The applause was not loud. It was steadier than that. It went on longer than any of them expected. Afterward, in the hallway outside, 3 other Westbrook students came to find Emily. One was a sophomore who had been quietly passed over for a music award the previous spring. One was a junior whose science fair project had been disqualified for irregularities. No one had ever explained. The third was a freshman who only stood at the edge of the group and listened. By the end of the week, the new administration had received 11 more letters from current and former students. The board commissioned an independent review of every award given at Westbrook Preparatory in the previous 5 years. Emily was not the only one who would eventually get something back. She was, however, the only one who got a phone call the following month from a college in North Carolina that had read about her in a newspaper, watched her race tape, and offered her a full athletic scholarship on the spot. They did not mention the medal in their offer. They only mentioned the 56.2 seconds. Daniel hung Emily's medal on the wall of his study beside the photograph of Sarah at the county fair and the photograph of Emily, age 7, crossing a finish line drawn in sidewalk chalk. He did not put it in a case. He left it on a simple nail. Some things he thought were meant to be touched. The porch light went back on the night of the second ceremony and stayed on after that. There was one more evening worth telling about. It was late in the season, the kind of Texas evening when the sky did not so much darken as bruise orange to copper to a low, slow violet at the far edge of the field. Emily had finished practice. She had not raced in any meet that night. She had only run the way she had always run for the simple animal reason of running. Daniel sat alone in the high bleachers, with a thermos cooling in his hand. He had been doing that for nearly a decade. Emily climbed the bleachers in her warm-up jacket and sat down beside him. She did not say anything for a while. They watched a sprinkler arc come on over the far end of the field. They watched the long stripe of shadow that the goalposts threw across the grass. "Dad," she said finally. Why didn't you give up when I asked you to? When I begged you to? Why didn't you stop?" He thought about it. He thought about Sarah, and about the porch light, and about the empty chair across the kitchen table, and about a girl who had once asked him while he was tying her shoe, "What if they don't let me win?" He thought about all of the answers he could have given her, and how most of them would not have been the truth. "Because you never did," he said. She looked over at him. "I begged you to. You begged me to with your words." He took a slow drink from the thermos. "You did not beg me to with your shoulders, or your hands, or the way you held your chin walking off that stage. A father learns to listen to all of his daughter Emily, not just the parts that talk." She looked down at her own hands then. The medal was not around her neck. It lived on the wall in his study now where it would stay. But her fingers went for just a moment to the spot at her collarbone, where the ribbon had been, where the ribbon would always, in some sense, be. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not believing me." He smiled, and he did not answer her because he did not need to. They sat together on the bleachers as the sun finished going. After a while, Emily stood up, stretched, and trotted back down onto the track for one more easy lap, because that was the kind of girl, she was the kind, who liked to leave a field by running across it. Daniel watched her go. Her stride at the far turn was long, and even the way Sarah's had been, the way it had been on every morning he had ever stood at a kitchen window and watched. The stadium lights had not yet come on. The horizon behind her was a slow ribbon of fire. She crossed the line that the goalposts threw across the grass, and then she crossed a line. Only he could see the one she had been carrying inside her chest since the night she had stood frozen under the gymnasium lights, with a metal warm against her collarbone. And she kept running, and no one in the world was ever going to take that finish away from her again. He stayed in the bleachers until she had finished her lap. Then he walked home in the dark toward a porch light that was already on.